Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. And how are you?
I'm very well. Yeah, I had a nice day off today, so I haven't done a huge amount. I'm kind of just counting down until I came here to meet you, which is quite a lot of the day to just sit there.
That's an
actually.
honour. That's an honour.
Welcome.
You've been performing and writing, and on stage, and in TV. Was that always something you wanted to do?
So from quite a young age, that was something I wanted to do. I originally, the thing I really wanted to be when I was growing up was a librarian, and I used to do this, imaginary game where I would pretend that I was a librarian. I would, miming this, but I'm aware this is a podcast, but I would take the books and then, do the barcode thing across and then stamp them and then, pop them to the side. And so I used to do this role play thing in my room over and over. But then my friend's mother saw a poster for a local, it was a professional Christmas show at our local theatre, but they needed children to come on board and be part of the chorus. And I went and auditioned for that, and I was 10 at the time. And when I got into to do that, and I spent that Christmas doing that show, that was when that was like, oh, there's no looking back. I just desperately want to be an actor. So then I was sort of unwaveringly wanting to do that so I spent from 10 to 18 wanting to do that, went to drama school, graduated from drama school, still just wanted to act.
And it was just that one
well,
show.
yeah, but then I just kept on doing it. Then I did that same show every year. I did, everything amateur that was offered to me, like youth groups, things like that, the school plays. Just, I was just totally obsessed with it. Begged my mum if I could go to stage school. Really pleased that she was like, absolutely not, because I actually don't think I would have necessarily fared very well there.
Why not?
Well, no, maybe I more mean that I fear I might have become sort of like look, I'm sure people come up out stage school and they're great personalities, but I also think there's a bit of danger that I would have become sort of like bratty and entitled.
Okay.
Did you go to stage school? I should have checked that. No, great, okay. Yeah, so where was I? Oh yeah, so I ended up going to drama school, and then even when I graduated, I still just wanted to act. But we had, for our dissertation, we could write a play or a musical or choreograph a dance, I think. Anyway, I was definitely not going to do that one. And I was very much going to do the play. And when I wrote the play, I was like, oh, actually, I do like this writing thing. But I still, just acting was my predominant interest and strand of my work. But then because I wasn't getting that much acting work, I started writing more and more. So I was writing shows and then taking them up to Edinburgh and performing in them. And then at some point, I'm sort of trying to think what age I would have been, but maybe around 25, 26, I think I was probably writing as much as I was acting.
Okay.
And then at some point, that kind of that overlap, they were overlapping, and then actually the writing sort of overtook. So then by the time I wrote this novel, I was kind of desperate to stop acting. I remember when I got this book deal, I was delighted to get the book deal, but I was also equally delighted because I thought, yes, now I can call my agent and tell her that I'm out. I didn't want to do it anymore, but I felt like I had to keep that strand going until I got the book deal, because I just thought,
Was it the pressure that you felt?
No, the thing about acting was it's just so much work that you are kind of required to do for free, like all of these self-tapes all of the time, all this auditioning. And actually, if you're not getting the roles, it's just really unrewarding. And unlike with writing, where I sort of think you're always getting better and you've got something to show for it, even if it's not published, it's there, it exists. Actually, just something about acting, I just thought, what are these self-tapes just going off like into the ether and never to be so I'm assuming somebody did watch them, although quite new. But I just found it to be amazingly unfulfilling by the end. Actually, I just really, I just lost my love.
So let's go back to Edinburgh Fringe like that time of performing and acting. How was it? Was it nerve-wracking? Did you really love it? Because obviously, I don't know, were you performing poetry? Were you performing like comedic acts? What was it?
My writing partner and I, the woman I performed the shows with, we always said before we were about to go on, we used to go, because it was under the banner of theatre, but we called it comedy theatre, but in the brochure it was under theatre, and we always just said in the wings, we'd say, I remember, if nobody laughs, it's just a play, it's just a straight play, because we all thought that as a backup. Obviously we did want people to laugh because we were kind of a comedy double act within this play that we'd written, but there was quite an earnest, serious strand that ran through it, and then we had this double act that sort of it was a play within a play, and in the double we always played ourselves trying to put on this very serious, earnest piece of work, but things would go wrong, and that was where a lot of the comedy came from.
I think it's so interesting that you say that you kind of had this overlap and then it sort of took off with your writing. At what point did you feel like you were craving that release of like the format of a novel?
Yeah, so that was when so I'd come back from Edinburgh and I had so the shows had gone well and I was getting interest from TV producers and I was writing like spec scripts and some of them were getting optioned, but I was never getting further than the optioning stage, and I was finding that again pretty demoralizing. And it was around that time.
What's optioning?
Oh, sorry. So that's when the production company buys your idea, but you then need to go to the stage where you then pitch it to the channel, and the channel commissioning it would be the next stage. And I never got to that stage.
Okay.
So I was never really even writing the full scripts. It was kind of like treatments that would be optioned. And again, and a treatment. Sorry, again, I'll just say in case listeners don't know, really like a document that outlines the characters, the episode breakdowns, things like that, but not the actual script, which is the thing that I enjoyed writing, right? So then at that time I took stock and I thought, actually, what am I spending most of my time doing, my leisure time? And I realized I wasn't actually watching television. I was reading. I was just like constantly reading. And I thought maybe I actually want to have a go at writing a novel, because I always think it's odd if you're not consuming the medium that you're working in. Like, I always think that's maybe a bit of a red flag. And I don't, I listened to that anyway, and I thought, okay, so probably maybe I will have a go at writing a book. And so I did. I wrote a whole book that wasn't as young as this.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is actually my first published book, but my second book. And that one, so that one didn't get published. Didn't even get an agent. I got kind of like half a dozen full manuscript requests from agents saying, oh, send me the whole thing. But then nobody wanted to sign it off the back of that. So that was pretty demoralizing.
Why do you think what that was? Like, in hindsight,
what
you know now.
Yeah, totally. Because I desperately tried to work it out at the time. I think fundamentally it was meant to be a thriller, and it wasn't very thrilling. So I do think that was an issue. Yeah. This is like, I've left that genre behind. I think that was.
I'd love to have a read.
I don't think anybody ever will of that one. And then I think maybe as well the character wasn't very, and likable is such an odd word, right? Because it's so subjective and you don't always need to like a character. But I think the thing that I worked out was people just didn't root for her. So even if she's unlikable, you normally root for an unlikable character. And I think this character just left people a bit cold. And because that was my fear, that I'd then write a book where the character wasn't likable again. So, but then it's odd because Margot's kind of very warm, so it's sort of the opposite of this character that I had before.
Yeah. I don't know. I found Margot a really, really interesting character because I didn't warm to her from the very beginning.
You didn't? Oh, okay, that is interesting.
So, and I understand what you mean when you say she's so warm and so bubbly and so kind of like wants to be liked by everyone, but that almost put me on a bit of a back foot. But anyway, we'll get to that point.
Yeah, because I'm intrigued at what. Do you remember around what chapter you started sort of coming on side?
It was quite a quick, like, okay, I get her. You know,
right?
It was more just I saw so much of myself in her that I almost sort of like didn't like her because I understood the decisions that she was making that were bad.
Oh, almost like you're trying to shake yourself and say, "Don't do that." Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I find it really interesting that you said that you were reading a lot at the point. Was that because of the fact that you were trying to escape from the writings, the watching side of things, or were you?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's right. I think I was sort of quite disillusioned about that industry, so therefore I didn't really want to engage with it. And I have noticed, not that I'm at all disillusioned with publishing, but actually now that I'm writing fiction, I watch so much more television, and actually I'm not reading as much as I was. So I do think maybe it's just about having a break from, which is sort of the opposite of what I said earlier about, what consuming the medium that you're working in. But actually I think there's also an argument to say you want to break from the medium that you're working in.
And also I feel like there's so much that you start to, I mean, me personally, I start to compare a lot.
Yes, yeah.
And so it's kind of like, if I have to consume something completely different, in order to stay in my lane of like I'm doing, what I want to do, and not be like, oh God, should I be doing something different?
Yes, because you start to get sort of influenced, I think, don't you? Yeah.
I feel like this is a book for anyone going through like panic years, right? And it made me feel so much less alone when I read it, and we've kind of touched upon that already. But was that your intent when you wrote it, or were you just kind of writing it as more of a letter to yourself?
Well, I love that it made you feel less alone, and that it was kind of comforting. I'm assuming, or reassuring, if you're saying it was like a panic news book. I wonder if it slightly depends on the age at which you read this book, because I mean, I had.
When did you start writing it?
Oh yeah, such a good question. I would have been about 32, I think.
Okay.
But I had a woman who came up to me and said, God, she was like, oh, I'm 34. She was like, couldn't you have made her a bit older? Like, I think she found it terrifying, actually, because she was at a state where she was single, wanting a child, and kind of thought, oh, I thought I still had time, you know, I would have freaked her out. So I think it slightly
you're
depends
when you're
coming at it. Whereas I think if you're coming at it from the vantage point of early 20s, then I think maybe you're, well, I don't know, because actually that's your experience. But all I can say is, as a listening to women who know slightly older who have read it, I think maybe it's instilled slightly more panic in them than reassurance. But I did definitely want it to be empowering. Ultimately, the ending.
Yeah.
But empowering, but I suppose not naive. And I think there's a sense of what Margot's had to sacrifice and compromise on in order to get the other thing that she wants. So I think that it's kind of acknowledging that yes, it's empowering, but not without cost.
Okay. But was when you hear people say, oh, you know, it made me feel less alone, or it freaked me out a little bit, what was your intent when you wrote it? Like, what was your favourite part about the whole writing process for you?
I think I was trying to tap into the predicament that I found myself in around that time, and that I would speak to so many other single women at at parties or friends or just at events, and we all seemed to be in the same situation where it was wanting, feeling ready to kind of start a family, but not having found somebody to do it with. And I think that actually I had read a lot of books about women who, about motherhood, women who were parents. I'd read a lot of books about women who didn't want children. I'd read books about women who were apathetic and weren't sure whether to have a child. And actually, I hadn't read a book that was about a woman who wanted a child but hadn't found the person. And then when I would talk about the book idea to people, they'd say, "But that's me. That's my life," you know. And that kind of really spurred me on when I was writing, just a bit like Margot, trying to make sense of that question. That was sort of what I was trying to do. Yeah.
So there's a lot of themes of like motherhood and father, even like, let's talk about the parents. Right. So you've got this father who's very, very stiff upper lip sort of like man who we warm to eventually, but from the beginning he was quite a complex character, and it was quite difficult to, in my opinion, take a sort of like a liking to him from the very beginning, right?
So like the characters made you really work to like them.
Was that your opinion?
My feeling, I'm always more sympathetic towards the father than I think some of the readers are. Maybe because he shares similarities with my own father. I've always sort of considered him to be quite lovable, but I actually think quite a few people have thought he's quite really quite difficult. I mean, I sort of intended to write a character that was emotionally unengaged and complex, but ultimately people never doubted how much he loved her and what a great father he was. And that's the bit that I sometimes think, oh, maybe actually I didn't succeed in doing that, because I think some people think he isn't a lovable, excellent father.
I definitely can resonate with the fact that my own father was very, like, you know, quite I wouldn't go as far to say emotionless, but he just shows emotion in a different way.
Right.
And so I can completely understand that. I just feel like when I read some of the sentences and some of the things that he said, I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I did. So, there was a thing with him, because I knew that I wanted her to have a loving, nuclear, stable unit. So I wanted to come from that, because then it would kind of heighten her expectation that she would be able to recreate this for herself. So definitely wanted that. But then at the same time, I didn't just kind of want to write a sort of, oh, everybody's happy, everybody's lovely. I just thought that'd be really boring and dull. And there needs to be more drama in it than that. So actually, that's also where those scenes with the father come from. I was writing them to kind of just stimulate myself and the reader, because if she doesn't have a sort of trauma background. There's not loads of drama that happens to her, but I wanted her home life, even though it was, like I said, relatively stable and loving. I did want the scenes to have an energy to them, you know?
To be honest with you, I think that kind of adds to the whole idea that it's kind of makes you feel less alone because everyone has a dysfunctional family in some sense of the word.
Right, yeah.
And so I think it really did add to it, even though there might be some people that really, really loved him, some people that didn't get so on with him so much, you know. So there's also a lot of themes of motherhood laced throughout the book, and it becomes a sort of non-negotiable for Margot. The idea of the biological clock and the sort of like the daunting aspect of that and having a baby, did that come quite naturally to you?
I think this comes back to the age at which I wrote it, and I think from 30 onwards, it seems impossible for that not to be part of the conversation. Whether you want children, don't want them, or not sure about having them, you're just sort of surrounded by it. So I think that was just totally natural for me at the life stage that I was writing it. And again, it goes back to the thing I was saying. I wanted to write a story about someone who had just thought, this is totally achievable, normal in inverted commas. Like, this is not that hard. You grow up with this expectation that, you know, you're fed it, maybe particularly as women, that you get married and have children. If you want that, then that's what you can have. And it doesn't seem insurmountable. You know, we're not saying I will be, you know, famous, I'll have, it's just, it feels like quite an attainable want. And then just looking at how a character could be so set on wanting that from a young age and work quite proactively to get that, and then still end up in that situation. And that was really just that was the question, the big question at the heart of the story. I mean, how, you know, she says it herself, how did you get here?
Yeah.
And she's trying to work that out throughout the book.
I find it really interesting that the way that you chose to do that was through these 11 men. And I think it's so cool, quite frankly.
That's great.
That you were able to like name every chapter as a different man. First of all, who was your favourite to write and why?
I
think everyone's got a different answer.
Well, I think probably if you tallied, so I think there is variation. If you did tallies for the most popular man, I think Frank would win.
Okay.
I actually think Frank was also the most fun to write, and I think in part just because he was
just kind of explain a little bit about Frank.
Frank's this kind of comedy. Is he a comedy producer, a comedy reviewer? I can't remember now. I think he's a reviewer, isn't he? They meet at the Edinburgh Festival. He's very, is described as, lovable and kind of effervescent. And they basically have a very physical relationship that lasts for a couple of months. And, you know, actually there was one Goodreads review I read, which was just literally one line long, and it just went, should have gone with Frank. And I really enjoyed that. I was like, yeah.
Just sums it up right there.
Totally. But yes, I think he was really fun to write for just the reasons that I've just said, but also because there was something I enjoyed the challenge of trying to convey that whilst Frank was this great, you know, undeniably good guy, he wasn't right for Margot. And, you know, there's that bit where she talks about lying on the beach and sending Oliver Raymond Carver quotes while she's simultaneously sending Frank nude pics and thinking, surely there must be a man out there who'd want to receive both of these. And that, in a way, just sums up her whole predicament. I mean, that's what she's looking for. And it doesn't feel unrealistic, but, you know, that's what she's sort of failing to find at that point.
Yeah. I think my favourite was probably Ren. Just for
Ren,
for the heart-wrenching, like, story between them. She thought he was the one.
Yeah, no, you're right. Ren would be
away.
A close second, or at least on par with Frank. It's different experiences writing them, but yeah.
How did you find flipping between all the different men? How did you draw inspiration for that?
Yeah, they do function as a bit of a palate cleanser, actually.
Yeah.
The
really?
Ren one, well, I think so, because I think the Ren one was very intense. And then you've got something like Frank, which you think, okay, well, he's not going to get such a long chapter because he didn't have, because in a way the chapter length correlates with how long she spends with them. So I think, you know, you've got Malik that comes shortly after Ren, and Malik she only meets about 3 times in her life or something, she says. So I think, you are looking, it's like, I was aware of the whole piece of them and the order and just the variation needed. I mean, if you're going to have 11 men, you've really got to, vary it, because you just can't read 11 similar stories.
Yeah. And did you do that to reflect different types of love? Have you yourself experienced those kinds of love? Have you sort of like drawn on any of your own personal experiences?
Not for the men themselves. The bit that came from me was the finding myself single in my early 30s. The men, no, the men I enjoyed making up. I mean, I did borrow some stuff from friends. I disguised it a lot, but borrowed and mixed it up around a lot. But no, I mean, I think I was reading this actually just this quote on the way here, a William Faulkner quote that said, "Writing is imagination, experience, and observation." And it's like absolutely, and for that I was tapping into observation and imagination, and other parts of the book I was tapping into experience. It's
yeah. Are you a people watcher?
I do watch people, but actually the thing that I watch people, but I think that's the observations around people and motivations, and that all comes to me kind of relatively easy. So the thing I'm really conscious of doing is I observe like settings, because I really struggle when I write settings. So actually I like consciously look around places sometimes, and now actually if I know I'm writing something like I've just finished my second book, and for that I had a period where I was literally going to places and jotting down on my phone, like, what does this street look like, and I had to really take it in, because it's not the stuff that comes naturally to me. No, whereas I think the people stuff does. So I hope that's kind of.
So you prefer, because this delves a lot into people and the complexity of people.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you lacked the setting, and that's why you wanted
exactly so like I might go somewhere in the evening, and I will have thought about the motivation of what made that person do something, but I will not have noticed that there was like a picture with pigs swimming in a swimming pool or something massive on the wall. I may have just spotted that now in this room, because I'm not so visually aware of my surroundings, but I'm quite obsessed with what's going on inside people. And
I really love, and this might be just my personal opinion, but I really like talking about like themes of identity, themes of sex, themes of like just the normal things that people go through every day. You wrote an anthology, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Big Sexy Lunch, was that right?
Yeah.
Which kind of drew on those exact themes.
Yes. Actually, sorry, I just realised it's not an anthology. I should correct on this, because I've only just realised myself. It's a pamphlet. Yeah.
Okay.
I really should know this. I think an anthology is several people's work put into a book,
my goodness.
And then a collection. No, it's fine. I should definitely know this. Collection is a larger chunk of just one poet.
Out of anything.
Pamphlet. This is the pamphlet length just of my poetry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you wrote a pamphlet.
That's right, a pamphlet.
Called Big Sexy Lunch.
Yeah.
Which draws on very similar themes that you wrote in this book, right? Has it always been something that comes quite naturally to you?
Yeah, and I actually always say regrettably. I mean, there's this bit in my
Don't say regrettably.
All right, no, you're right. I just sometimes wish I had more facts that I could hold on to. Like I'll listen to a podcast about, I don't know, like an event in history, and I'll retain none of it, and then I'll remember the most irrelevant details about somebody's breakup or like their wives' parents' names, and it's like, I don't need to know that. I'm clogging my brain with this stuff. But I've always gravitated towards that, and
why do you think that is?
I don't know. I have no idea. I'm not sure if I could ever work that out. I mean, that's just like saying, why does somebody like running? Why does somebody else like swimming? I mean, I think it is just what it is. I just always have been interested in relationships, people, sex, romance, friendship. It's just all the stuff that is quite unfactual and can't really take hold of it. That's the stuff that I've
But don't you think there's something to be said about like the fact that all of that amounts to people, communication? And that is something that's so important, and it makes you emotionally intelligent, right?
I can't remember any facts, but yes, emotionally intelligent. Yeah.
So did you learn a lot about yourself while you were writing this book?
I think I learned that I think the main thing was actually that I had the resilience to write another book, because when that first one didn't get published, it was a really, really low, and actually almost I was pretty panicked by the fact that it didn't get published, because I was just feeling so lost in my career, because I didn't want to act anymore. The TV stuff really wasn't taking off. And I just, and I just thought, God, what am I going to do? And then I got this idea, and I just didn't really question it. I just started writing, and I wrote this first draft very quickly in 3 months. And I think.
When did you write it?
I think it was 2021.
So lockdown?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, lockdown feels like it went on for a long time, so I'm trying to think of which part of it. But it would have been lockdown. So I think the resilience to write another book, which I wasn't sure if I would, I didn't know that I was going to be able to do. And then also maybe just, I'm not a very patient person, and I think I really learned patience with this, because possibly one of the reasons why the first book didn't get published was because I was also a bit hasty with how quickly I sent it to agents.
Okay.
And so for this one, anytime I kind of thought I was ready, I just kept going, no, you another read. And I kept finding things. And it was just, I mean, I would be like almost screaming at the room or like clenching my fists. I just couldn't believe that I still hadn't sent this thing off. But I just really just held back until I just thought it was the best that I could make it, because I was so terrified of it being rejected again. And I think normally I've been more, not slapdash, but just a bit less pernickety with stuff. I haven't revised it as much.
And also, I suppose that things like horror and thriller, they take a lot more plot-wise and like narrative.
Yeah.
When they're like plot-driven, whereas this is very character-driven.
Yes.
Did you find that easier to write?
Definitely, yeah. And actually, it's interesting because with this one, I didn't plot it out. Whereas actually, this is probably just obvious. I did plot out the thriller one, and I didn't with this. So it was kind of interesting to me that this was the one that sort of took off. Whether it was just something more instinctive about it, or I don't know.
What's your sort of writing process then? What was like your approach to this?
Yeah, so for this one, so for the other one, I actually had this whole kind of crib sheet where I looked at, my Word document was open, and then I would look to this document and go, right, what needs to happen in this chapter, and I had bullet points, and then I would write that. And this one, I just got the idea about this woman looking back over her life with through each of these different men. And I just wrote, and then I looked up, I looked up 3 months later, not quite, obviously, I was doing other stuff, but it was quick, it was instinctive. And then of course there was huge amounts of redrafting, but yeah, that first draft just came together very quickly, and without plotting.
Yeah.
Do
you feel like in your life and in your day-to-day you're more structured or more like a bit chaotic?
Definitely more structured. I actually wish I was more chaotic sometimes.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, I'm really organized. I'm really structured. I'm so unchaotic. It's like probably the least word the word that would describe me the least.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So that completely contrasts to how you wrote this book. Because
yes, I think I'm just saying, because actually it's quite similar to Margot in terms of her sense of control and
oh my goodness.
But no, it does, and actually maybe that's why I felt there was like this nervous energy, and that I was a bit frightened, because I thought, I haven't really, I don't know where this is going, and maybe that's what was nerve-wracking.
But it also made sense that you went back through it so many times as well.
Yes, definitely. And sorry, I say I didn't know where I was going, but actually I did have a sense of the beginning and the ending. Although the beginning and the ending changed, I vaguely knew, at least symbolically, where she needed to end. And then I had the structure of the 11 men, so it wasn't entirely just writing in the dark. Actually.
Yeah. And then obviously we have the very prominent subject of love.
Yeah.
And what it means. And it's so subjective. And I think that Margot goes through and sort of thinks that she's in love when she might not be, and vice versa, quite a few times. And I really, really sympathise with her for that. Was there any point at which you sort of like understood love a bit more, do you think? Or do you think it's all of us just going through the dark?
Is it me as Roxy to understand love? I don't know. I mean, I think I do have a handle on what it feels like to be in love. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely something I've experienced in a few times in my life. And I think it's really hard, isn't it, to not just undermine the earlier times and kind of not just write them off and go, well, that doesn't count because now it's not the person I've ended up with, or because actually I do think
everyone teaches you something different, right?
Yeah, definitely, and I do think it's still love at that time when it existed. Just trying to think, and I think they share similar attributes at different stages of life. But yeah, I mean, love. I think, I don't know, it's totally subjective, like you said. But if I was to try and condense it in a few words, I mean, maybe it's sort of like some form of feeling very secure and safe. I think is perhaps the main feeling, and I think maybe what Margot has is infatuation at points, which she perhaps mistakenly identifies as love.
Yeah. Do you think you learned more about what love is through the writing of this book, or do you think you just kind of...
No, I think I put what I already knew about love into this book.
You wrote it in second person.
Yeah.
I find that so interesting and so different, and you don't find it very often.
No, because I mean, you read so many books. Had you read other books in the second person?
The only book that I can remember recently reading was A Ladder to the Sky. The second part is written in second person, and I love that so much.
I also do love it when books flit around like that and mix the different narrative viewpoints. Yeah,
it's like unreliable. You know,
I love suddenly such a shift when you go, oh, we were in first a minute ago, or we're in third, and now we're in.
So, first of all, I want to ask you: did it always start off like that?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I heard it in the second person, so I heard the lines when I first started writing it. I didn't have the beginning prologue, but the book began originally with the start of the Elliot chapter, the first man, and I heard you have kissed boys before and been out with them for several weeks at a time. Dawson's Creek, all that bit. But maybe I started writing it up to a few pages in the second person, and then very, very quickly I just thought, hang on, this is madness. Like I'm not yet published. The second person is not a conventional thing to do. I need to play this much more, conservatively. I need to write this in the first or third. So I wrote it all in the third person. All of it in the third person. Yeah, sent it to a friend of mine, an early reader friend, and she wrote back saying, I felt pretty detached from Margot as a character.
Okay.
Why don't you write her in the first person? So I tried her in the first for a few pages, and she was she was just immediately annoying to me, actually. She just didn't work in the first. There was something about it that was just, annoying is kind of the best way I can describe it. I think because she's quite in touch with her emotions, something about the first just made it, you needed that degree of remove, I think, that the second gives you. So then basically I was forced to go back to the second, even though it was my original idea anyway, just resisted it and put the whole thing to the second. And I mean, I had a few people, I sent it to, a dozen agents, and a lot of them wanted it actually, but I had one who just said, the second just doesn't work for me. So I think it's, you're never going to get everybody on side. And I think, again, some reviews have just said, I couldn't do the second person. I gave up halfway. Yeah. I don't think.
When you had it in the third person, how did you feel about it?
The third. The second was the best one for me. I just
you weren't sure on yourself?
I just was thinking, I want to get published. I'd had that book that hadn't been published, and I just thought, second person, I mean, that's not. I was looking for examples, and I thought, I haven't even read anything in second person. It's just not. It's not common, is it? Like we said.
Did you actively look for books that were written in second person? Once you then started writing it.
Yeah, I did do a bit of research to check it was at least, like not a completely never done thing before, and the kind of similar culprits came up. None of which I've read, but there were a few titles that people saying, "Oh, this is second person, this is second person."
I personally love it.
Oh, well,
and I'll tell you why. It's because I found it at times quite unforgiving. Like that, it spoke to me, as you say, as a person in my sort of early to mid 20s. I was caught off guard quite a lot. I was like, and I think that's why I had that sort of like reaction towards Margot, because I felt like you were talking to me rather than like
almost like you're being told off or something.
No. As in a way, it was refreshing because I felt like I was being heard. But it was also like it was reminding me of all these past experiences that I'd had.
So I love that you said about it being unforgiving. I actually love that as a word. I find that to be really complimentary, actually, that you say that about it.
Of course.
Yeah.
Please take it like that, because it really is. Did you ever view As Young as This as a letter to your younger self?
I really like that, and I hadn't ever, but I think now I will, because I really enjoy that.
You're going to take that?
I'm going to take that, and I will do it as a letter to myself. I think it's almost... could it almost as well just be like Margot's letter to her younger self? Or no, probably more similarly, Margot's letter to her older self from her younger self, saying, "Hey, this is how we ended up here." It almost feels like that. Definitely think there's something meta in that. Yeah.
So also at the beginning of the book, I think that Margot strives for this like perfect coupledom. What do you think? I personally do fall into the trap of sort of like sometimes striving for that, without realizing, okay, hey, let's take a step back and realize it's kind of unattainable. But what do you think about that whole phenomenon?
Yeah, so I think that is the first chapter with Elliot, I think, where she says, striving for the image of perfect coupledom, and I do think that she matures a lot over the course of the book, so that actually by the time it gets to, I mean, there's a conversation she has with Lily in, I think it's the Patrick chapter. So Patrick's number 10. I think he's number 10 of the 11 men. That's quite late on, and she says, she lists the attributes that she's looking for. She says something like, I want a shared sense of humor and values. I want somebody I'm physically, and sexually compatible with, and I want someone who's, intelligent and earns a decent like income or something like.
Yeah.
And Lily says those are just basic things. Like they're not unrealistic or expectations to have. And I think that, yeah, I think that's probably part of Margot's journey, because actually, and then of course the final sort of coming of age bit, I think, for her is letting go of the image of never mind perfect, just coupledom in entirely, right, which is the thing she's been holding on to throughout.
Yeah.
So yes, I think that evolves hugely, and I think that comes with age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you plan to end it the way that it did?
Yes, so the ending was entirely different. It was actually a different genre altogether. It was like magical realism. We won't go into it now, but it was.
Wait, no, we need to.
Well, in a nutshell, I think I've sure spoken about this on another podcast. Actually, I originally had it that I saw this woman dressed in white at a table, like a Last Supper scene, with, I think maybe we were 12 men at that point, like her disciples. And she had gathered them all together to this function room at the top of a pub. And so that was the beginning. Then the middle of the book was each of the chapters of the men, so her relationship with each of them. And then at the end, she actually revealed she was pregnant by immaculate conception. So anyway, so
with all the men.
Well, immaculate conception. So like Mary.
With all the men there.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, in the room.
Oh wow.
So in a sense, that was vastly
that would have been vastly different.
Yeah, very much so. So I sent it to a friend. She said, because this was way before it went out to Asians, this was the first draft, and she said, "You've got a great middle of a book here," but she said, "You've got to lose the magical realism. It's not your genre." So I spent this quite fraught week thinking, "Oh my gosh, well, what can I end it with?" And then another friend of mine actually said to me, "What is it you're trying to say?" And I said, "Well, I've always imagined the ending to be this kind of empowering moment of her realizing she doesn't need a man, that she could do it without one." And she said, this friend of mine said, "What's the simplest way of doing that?" And I said, "Oh, I mean, I suppose the simplest way would just be, I don't know, her doing like IVF and becoming a single parent." It was like penny drop moment. Oh, it could just be that. So in that sense, yes, I knew she was not going to end up with any of the men. I kind of knew where it was going to. Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Oh yeah, well, spoiler alert. Maybe you can cut that. I don't
know. Yeah, I mean, I loved it. I think it was such a poignant part of the book, because it keeps you guessing up until the very end. Because obviously, from the beginning, she's with a man.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Lily.
Lily, yeah.
How did you come up with her character?
I definitely wanted Margot to have a very close female friend. Like, I wanted to have the sister character. Lily and Romilly were in it much less actually than they are at the moment. It was actually my agent and then my editor, and both times that I was redrafting with each of them, they really encouraged me to just have more, because it was a much more streamlined version of just the men actually at the start, and they barely had the peripheral characters in it. And then they just kept saying, "Oh, we want more of Lily, more of Romilly." So I just kind of kept expanding on that and drawing out their characters. And I think it is a way stronger book because of it. I resisted it at first. I kind of thought, "Oh, I want it to be about the men," and my editor was like, "Oh, don't worry, it will still very much be about the men." But yeah, we do want more of the family, and I added the grandmother. She was in it,
I think that personally, I'm someone who really likes to have like one-on-one friendships. Did you have that one person or that sister or whoever in your life that like you kind of drew that inspiration from for those characters?
So I do have a sister, who has inspired Romilly,
Oh really?
Okay. Yeah.
Because Romilly's like this tough nut.
Yeah, well, actually, my sister, no, she's inspired it in part. She's not as tough as Romilly in a complimentary way,
Yeah, of course.
But and then I actually grew up with with a group of, there were 5 of us. We were very like close friends from primary school, and we're still friends now. So it was more like a group that I had. But But yeah, one of my very, I mean, Lily, a lot of that again was inspired by a good friend of mine who I was at drama school with and did comedy with. So yes, I've sort of definitely borrowed bits with the female characters from my life. Yeah, I mean, you can, like I said, I've got a sister, and there's a female, there's a sister character in it. But I mean, it's clearly fiction. That's kind of where I get a kick writing, stuff. I don't have much interest in being, truthful, but that's not true. I'm very interested in being honest in writing, but I'm not interested in using facts and details from real life. I want the emotional honesty, but then that doesn't derive from real life instances,
Yeah. Do you find that quite easy to sort of shape characters, sculpt them, and
Yes, I think character I do. Yeah. I think that does come naturally to me, and whether that's because of acting or just because of who I am as a person, like I said, always thinking about, why does somebody say that? Why does somebody respond that way? Is that actually what they're thinking? Is that actually what they want? I'm quite just into that.
Yeah. So what's next?
What's next? Yeah. Second book. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So it's a 2-book deal. So the second book is actually coming out.
Is it a series?
No, it's not. It's not. I mean, it's a similar readership in that it's about a woman in her early 30s again, but no, completely entirely different story. So that's coming out. It's called Wants and Needs, and it's coming out not till spring 2026 actually. So quite a while to wait. But yeah, I've just finished the copy edit on that. So that's
Anything you can say about that?
Yes, I mean, I can give you a sort of nutshell. In a nutshell, it's so again, I said it's a woman in her early 30s who decides to trial a non-monogamous relationship when her engagement gets broken off, because basically her aim is to learn to become less attached. But then obviously things don't go to plan because she ends up falling much harder than she intended. So thus the drama ensues.
When you sort of like come up with plots,
and
I suppose this goes back to the fact that you said you read a lot. What do you like reading, and do you sort of draw inspiration from that, or is it like
a bit. I think the book I can think of immediately that springs to mind that I absolutely adored. I think it's still my favourite book of the last 5 years is Sorrow and Bliss.
Okay.
I mean, I would be
Meg Mason, right?
Yeah, and I would be honoured if people even remotely compared this to that, because I don't really think that that's similar. But yeah, but they're kind of, you can see how there'd be a similar world. It's like commercial literary fiction. Women. Martha's 10 years older than Margot, even at the end at 34. But yeah, and then actually other authors, I don't think I'm not sure how closely the stuff I read actually is in the same world as the stuff I write, because other 2 favourite authors of mine that I'll read everything by are Sigrid Nunez and Elizabeth Strout. And actually, I mean, they're about people, and their characters are often about writers, but other than that, I can't see a huge amount of similarity, and those are women in their 60s writing those books. So yeah, I'm wondering if I like reading. I feel so safe with people like Elizabeth Strout. It's like watching a master at work. You just feel, I don't know if you
like
read
you're
her
in
books,
good hands.
but yeah, I'm just like, I wonder if I'm reading those because it's not close to what I write, but I just want to learn and get better at my craft, and I just so enjoy them. I mean,
yeah. So, did you have to learn anything in your life to write this book? Do you think that there's anything, because there's a lot of mistakes that are made by Margot and a lot of self-doubt that she goes through, and she goes through this very big journey of understanding herself. Do you think that kind of, do you think that sort of stops at any point, or do you think that kind of carries on throughout your life?
I suspect it carries on. I mean, I can only speak from the vantage point of my mid-30s, but I would be amazed if I reached a point where I thought, I've sorted, I've cracked this now. I think I sort of feel, if anything, I know less and I'm less sure about stuff the older I get. That's just me personally.
Not giving me much hope.
Well, no, but I don't think it's a bad thing. I quite like the not knowing.
Okay.
But I do think there's a confidence that comes with age that I do like. I do enjoy that. So,
why do you think that is?
You care a bit less, I think. That's part of it. And you have more of a frame of reference. So, I mean, if you even take something like heartbreak, you have no sense of the first time that happens that you'll get over it, because you think I won't. I'll literally die from this. And then once you've survived it once, you realise, oh, it is awful, but I will, because last time I did, so this time I will.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's part of it.
Roxy, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been such a pleasure.
It's such a nice way to spend a Thursday afternoon.
Yeah?
Yeah. Brilliant.